Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lead at Any Level Live. My name is Amy Waninger, and I am your host. I'm the founder and CEO of Lead at Any Level, and I'm so glad to have you here. Sorry I'm a little late today. I had some technical difficulties, and I am glad to be here, even if I'm a little bit late. So typically, Lead at Any Level Live comes to you Mondays at noon Eastern on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Today, I'm coming to you live at noon 09 Eastern. On Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. What I wanted to talk to you about today, I made an intentionally provocative and a little bit misleading title, so I hope you'll forgive me. But the title today is Don't Ask People What They Think. And that's not the whole story. The whole story is don't ask people what they think and then tell them what to think. And I'm going to share a couple of examples of this, but really what I want to do is bring you every week some inclusive skills or some essential skills for inclusive leaders. And one of those essential skills is how do you receive feedback and how do you solicit feedback? And one of the things that we do as leaders periodically is we ask for feedback that we don't really want to hear. And I'm going to ask you to not do that, to do something differently. So let's talk just a little bit about receiving feedback and what that looks like. A lot of times we will hear as leaders that things are not going so well, that people are confused, or that people don't agree with the direction, or they don't understand the direction. A lot of times when we're getting pushback or what we see as resistance, what's really happening is a couple of things. Number one, we haven't clearly articulated the vision. Number two, we have articulated the vision, but not the why behind the vision. So people don't understand why we chose that path as opposed to a different path. Or number three, we've asked people what they thought, and then we never got back to them, or we didn't show that we heard what they thought. And so it looks like we've discounted what they've told us. And a lot of times resistance is they just don't understand everything they need to understand to get on board. Or they don't really know how to process a change or how to process what we're telling them. So anytime we encounter resistance or we're getting feedback that things aren't working, we need to stop and ask, why is that? What is it that, sorry about my dog, what is it that people are not hearing from us that they need to hear? What have we not communicated clearly? Or what if we ask them that then they think that we have ignored? Because when we ask somebody what they think and then we tell them that they are wrong, we are basically telling them to never, ever, ever tell us again what they think. And so we need to be very careful about that. Let me give you a couple of examples. First example is basically a personal one. So if you'll forgive me for this, but I have a tendency to do this with my kids, and I've talked to them about this and how I can do this better. So I'll ask them two things, right? Do you want to do this or this? Do you want to go out for burgers or pizza? Right? And they say burgers, and then I realize that the burger place that they like is way across town, or the line's too long, or whatever, and pizza would be much faster. So they say burgers, and I say, you know what? Forget I asked. Let's just go get pizza. That will be easier. Now, what I've done is I've given them a choice, offered them a choice, they've chosen, and then I've taken that choice away from them. And in my mind, what I'm doing is kind of thinking out loud, right? Well, maybe we should do this. We could do burgers or pizza. Which do you think would be better? And then I add information into the equation that they're not privy to and make a decision that goes against what they said, right? It's a simple example, but it's one that happens quite a bit. Especially if you have multiple kids with different opinions, right? And then they feel like they didn't really get a say. They almost feel set up, right, to fail. And so then what happens is the next time I say, well, do you guys want burgers or pizza? They say it doesn't matter because they don't think they're going to be heard anyway. Well, the same thing might be happening with your employees, right? You ask them for feedback. They tell you they don't feel heard. And so the next time you ask, they will not tell you. And this happens a lot. And the more of a power difference you have between you and the employees that you're asking, the less likely you are to hear the truth, especially if you have discounted what they've told you in the past. Now, let's talk about all the ways that we do actually ask for feedback from our employees and how that might show up. So I work with companies all over the world, and I've done all different kinds of feedback sessions, right? Or different kinds of feedback solicitations. We can do quantitative surveys where it's, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree with this statement? We can do qualitative surveys, which are more open-ended questions. I've been involved in projects and work with people who do listening sessions, one-on-one or group facilitation, where they listen and kind of tease out what's going on with the culture. People use 360-degree feedback. They use their own one-on-ones as managers with their people. They use skip levels. They use town halls, right? There are all kinds of different ways that we can solicit feedback from our employees, find out what's really going on. Um, in all of those cases, though, we need to remember that there's a difference of power between us and the people that report to us, between the decision makers and the worker bees, between the policymakers and the people affected by those policies. And a lot of times what happens is people give their opinions, right? And their opinions are aggregated, and maybe their opinions are aggregated and some people's opinions count more than others because some people get drowned out, right? Because maybe let's say you've only got 5 people on your team who are under the age of 30, and you've got 100 people on your team who are over the age of 30, right? Those 5 people, their opinions are likely to get drowned out by the other 100. And that's true no matter what the demographics or the locations or the geographies or the politics of the organization are, right? Small groups get lost in the masses if we're talking about people in aggregate. The other thing, though, that can happen is if we're talking one-on-one with people, they may tell us something and they feel like they're being very brave. And if it's the first time we've heard it, we may discount it. And we may think, well, that's probably not true, or that's just their opinion, that's just their perspective, right? If it's hard for us to hear, it's easy for us to discount or ignore or wave off. And so what I'm asking you to do as a leader is kind of step away from your ego for a little bit. When somebody's giving you feedback, when they're telling you they're confused, they're telling you something's not working, they're telling you they don't agree with a decision or a direction or a policy's confusing or whatever the topic of the day is. If they're giving you feedback that you don't want to hear, stop for just a moment and acknowledge what they're telling you. And just ask them, I don't have all the information to respond to that right now, but I appreciate what you're telling me. Can you give me some time to think about this? And that way you're not making a decision on the fly, you're not changing something on the fly, you're not stopping everything to do what they're asking you to do, right? But you are promising to take the thing that they're telling you under consideration. And then you have to actually go out and look for corroborating evidence, right? Look for other places where people might tell you the same thing, where you might hear the same kind of feedback. But here's what I want to caution you against as a leader. When somebody comes to you with a problem or they give you feedback that makes you uncomfortable or that you would like to dismiss and you don't want to believe is true, our perception, or I'm sorry, our kind of a reflex as leaders is to say, when a problem pops up, right, we say, well, nobody told me there was a problem. That may or may not be true, right? Somebody probably did tell you or tried to tell you, and you missed the signals, you missed the cues because your focus is elsewhere or your assumptions were elsewhere, and maybe they didn't align with what somebody was telling you. So before you say, nobody told me this was a problem, really take an inventory of the people that you've talked to, the things that you've observed. Were there indicators that there might be a problem? The second thing we say is, well, not enough people told me there was a problem. Okay, so now you're saying maybe nobody told me, but maybe not nobody, but not enough people told me. I only had one data point, so I didn't want to act based on one data point. Well, it's kind of your job to go find other data points, right? And other things to say, well, is this true? Is this not true? Is this a commonly held perception? Is it not? So no one told me, probably not true. Not enough people told me, that may be true. But once you've heard it once, it's your job to go find out, is that a trend? Is that something that you need to know more about? And if you say not enough people told me to the one person that did tell you, now you're telling that person that they don't count. So be really careful with not enough people told me. You might also hear leaders say, nobody told me, not enough people told me. People didn't tell me in the right way for me to understand the problem. And again, now you're leaders who say that, right? People didn't tell me in the right way, are discounting the folks who did try to step up, who did try to indicate that there was a problem. So there are all these ways that this plays out, right? So leaders can say, nobody told me, not enough people told me, the right people didn't tell me. I didn't hear this from people I trust. Well, what does that say to the people that did tell you that you don't trust them or you don't believe them, or they were easy to ignore, or they were expendable, or they were not valuable enough to be listened to, right? Or if you say people didn't tell me in the right way, that tells me that I've got to be managed, right? People need to manage up to get the message through to me as a leader. And that's really difficult because some people don't know how to do that, number one. But number two, they're being vulnerable, right? They're putting themselves at risk to tell you. They're seeing something you don't. They're coming to you and saying, this is a problem that you might want to look out for. They're trying to help you. And if you tell them that they didn't tell you in the right way, they're unlikely to come back. So if you want to give the kind of feedback that you need as a leader to recognize resistance in your organization, to recognize discontent, to solve problems, then it's important that you listen, no matter how people tell you, that you're actually looking for and listening to what they're really saying or not saying, that no matter who it is that tells you, that you're listening and you're open to the feedback, that no matter how many people tell you or don't tell you, that you see the feedback as valid, and that when people try to tell you, you're hearing them. And so this is true regardless of whether you're using quantitative or qualitative measures, whether you're using surveys or one-on-ones or town halls, whether you're using, you're doing sessions yourself where you're gathering data, or you've hired somebody to come in. The point is that regardless of where the information comes from or how it gets to you, that you are willing to consider it, to consider the validity of it, and you are willing to take action or at least communicate back based on what you've heard. So the answer is not, as I maybe provocatively, maybe unfairly put in the title, don't ask people what they think. That's not the answer. The answer is don't ask people what they think if you're not willing to hear them. Don't ask people what they think if you're only going to tell them they're wrong. Don't ask people what they think if you don't care what they think. Because the quickest way to break down trust is to ask people what they think and then ignore what they've told you or tell them that they're wrong. I hope that this is helpful to you. If you are struggling as a leader to get feedback from your folks, if there's a breakdown of trust somewhere, if they don't trust you to handle that message or they don't trust you to carry that message forward, if you don't know that you trust the feedback that you're getting, it might be time to engage somebody from the outside to help you. And I would love to be given that chance. I have a number of tools I can use, both qualitative and quantitative, to help try to figure out who feels included in your organization and who doesn't and why. What are the places and spaces where people feel like they're able to contribute, and where are the places and spaces that they hold back, and who's doing that? I believe that in any culture, right, in any company, you have two things going on. You have the people that you intend to include in your culture, and you have the people who actually feel included, right? No culture, no company is inclusive to everyone, right? Every culture is inclusive to someone. So the idea is to take who do you want to feel included and who actually does feel included. And you want to make sure that those two populations overlap as much as possible. That's how you're going to create the kind of culture that will move your organization forward in the direction that you want to go. Align to your mission, align to your vision, align to your values, so that you have people who are really on board and, ultimately who feel valued for the right reasons. But we have to be really explicit about who do we want to feel included, and then we have to know, are we hitting the mark? So the more overlap we have there, the better. And again, I have tools that can help with that. I have a quantitative survey that's very good at helping you figure out who feels included and who doesn't and why in your organization. And then when we need to hear the stories behind the data, I have a lot of partners who can help with that as well. So if this is something you're struggling with in your organization, if you wish you got better feedback, if you wish you knew what people thought, if you wish that you could hear from the masses, and get the truth from their perspective. Remember, truth is not always binary. It's not always yes or no, it's true, right? But true from their perspectives. And again, the more distance between you and the people you're asking, the less likely you are to get unfiltered truth. It's very scary to tell people who control your paycheck and your employment what you really think if you don't trust them. So it's okay to ask for help. I'm here to help. You can contact me at, workwithlaal.com for work with lead at any level. And I would be happy to talk you through what kind of feedback are you getting? What are you doing with it? How are you processing it? How can you make it better? And we can point you in the direction of some strategies you can use based on what's working and what your goals are. So I would love to hear from you about how you're getting feedback and how you're incorporating that, what you're doing with it. If you are just looking to get started in the work of, diversity and inclusion, I have a special treat for you. On Thursday, on Including You, I will be interviewing Blessing Allison at Red River Federal Credit Union. She has just undertaken some new diversity and inclusion work in her company, and she is really excited to share. I thought what was a brilliant tip about how to start an employee resource group in a company that doesn't know what employee resource groups are and how to get those started. So that it's a grassroots effort, but it's also, kind of encouraged from a central location. And I thought her tips were brilliant for this. So that will be Thursday at noon Eastern. Wherever you're watching this video, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and you can catch the replay on YouTube or on my website at leadatannylevel.com. But you'll make sure and join us on Thursday for a Blessings interview on Including You. Thank you all so much. I'll see you here next week on Monday at noon Eastern with more essential skills for inclusive leaders on Lead at Any Level Live. Thanks so much.